Hi, I'm Emily and welcome back to the Pepper Knits Knitting Podcast. I'm a knitter based in Perth in Western Australia and thank you for joining me for episode 27. I hope everyone is doing well. I have been travelling a little bit since the last episode. I spent a couple of weeks with my family back in England and I had such a lovely time. It was beautiful weather, we had some really nice warm days, and yeah, just overall it was really enjoyable to be able to catch up with my grandparents and my cousins and the rest of my family. But I'm back home now and yeah, back to reality. But I have managed to work a lot on my projects, and I also picked up quite a few acquisitions on my travel, so I'm looking forward to sharing that and talking about my plans. Before I jump into the rest of today's episode, I did want to mention the gifts that I had knit for my grandma. I shared them on the podcast. She loved both of them. I knit her a poet scarf by Sari Nordland, and that was kind of the main gift, and she did really like that. I did also knit a tea cozy as a bit of a joke in the shape of Grommet from Wallace and Grommet. And he is like the new star in their house. He's already on a teapot and he has covered a teapot that the lid was broken on. So that teapot has been rescued. My grandparents absolutely loved him and I was so relieved. I was a bit worried giving it to them that they wouldn't get the reference and they wouldn't recognize who it was. But he has gone down very well and enjoying his new home on the tea cozy shelf. I'll briefly mention what I'm wearing as well. This is the Cara Wrap cardigan designed by Rebecca Clow, and I knit this I think around November, December last year. I used a strand of Knitting for Olive Merino with a strand of the Chaska Suri lace, which created a really lovely soft fabric and is very comfortable against skin. I don't find the Suri irritates me at all like a mohair sometimes might. Which is great because I pretty much wear this against skin, although I do have to wear a singlet underneath just because the cross I feel like is quite low, and with this slippery fabric it doesn't really want to hold in its place, it does just want to fall open. So yeah, I do always wear something like this underneath, but yeah, it's a really cozy warm cardigan. So moving into the actual podcast, I have one finished object and a few new works in progress. I don't know if any of them are brand new, or at least I've mentioned most of them I think in my plans, and yeah, some acquisitions as well that I'm the most excited to talk about. So my one finished object is a very classic Oslo hat. It's not very exciting. I feel like so many people have knit this pattern, and myself included, I have already knit 3 or 4 or 5 of these. It is a pattern by Petite Knit, and I will say though, this is the first one that I have knit since she updated the pattern, which was somewhat recently. I think a couple of months ago she sent an update for the pattern, and I could be wrong, but I believe now the regular version and the mohair version are combined into one pattern. And I can't remember if that means that the gauge has changed, but the needle size has changed. I remember previously I had knit all my Oslo hats on the recommended 3.5mm needle, and when I opened up the pattern I realized that the new pattern suggests a 3mm needle. I did end up knitting this one on a 3.5mm needle, but that was because I felt like my gauge was going to be way too tight and it would be really uncomfortable to knit with the yarn that I had used. This is a gift for my father-in-law for his birthday. He requested a plain black beanie, and yeah, this is like a no fuss pattern. It's my go-to for gifts, and because I've knit so many, I know I can kind of whip one up relatively quickly. I think this took me like 3 or 4 days. There's not a huge amount of knitting, although it is like a triple folded brim, so that does I think take the most amount of time, but I feel like once the brim's done, the rest of the hat goes by so quickly. He is someone who has absolutely no tolerance to wool, and I didn't want to take any chances by getting like a wool blend or even something that I felt like was really soft, like a superwash or anything. So I did just end up going with a 100% acrylic yarn. It was a really inexpensive, budget-friendly one that I found in Spotlight, mainly because that was the only option that was 100% acrylic and had a nice black color. You can probably tell it is a pretty stiff fabric and it does just want to stick up like this. But you know, I feel like this will meet the requirements that he has for the hat. He is also, I think, quite hard wearing on his clothes, especially when he's working outside. So I wanted something that would stand up to the elements and being thrown around and being put in the washing machine. So I think this was a good choice of yarn. I did end up buying 2 balls of it because I feel like when I've knit Oslo hats previously, I always end up needing about 150 grams if I'm getting like a plain DK weight wool. But this did have a little bit more meterage than a regular DK. I think it was like 230 or something. I have the ball up here. So this is 270 meters per 100 gram ball, and this was the yarn that I ended up using. So yeah, I did end up getting 2 balls, and I didn't even break into this one. I still have a tiny bit left over from the first ball, and I could return it, but I don't think I have the receipt. So I'll probably just end up making another hat the same. I know that I can get a hat out of 1 ball and give that to my husband or my dad or someone else who would like a black hat. So back to the needle size, because this yarn I just really didn't think I'd be able to knit comfortably with 3mm needle. I just ended up going with a 3.5, and I actually bought the 40 centimeter 3.5mm needles that I have specifically for knitting Oslo hats. So I don't have a 3mm needle with a 40 centimeter cable. So that was another influencing factor of my decision to just go with that needle size. So because I used a larger needle size, I did knit a size smaller than I usually would. If I was medium gauge, I would have knit the adult large size, but I just went down to the adult medium size instead, and I feel like it will fit perfectly, I hope. It is a little bit too big on me, and it's quite tall as well, so I'm hoping it will fit well. The actual circumference I think will be fine. I'm a little bit worried it might be a little bit tall. I have found that previously with the Oslo hat pattern. I always take out a little bit of chunk here in like the main body of the hat, and I did the same thing here, and I feel like even like that it might be a little bit too tall. But worst case scenario, I can ask him to try it on, and if he'd like it shorter, I'll just rip back the decreases and a little bit of the body and then just re-knit the decreases. It doesn't take very long. The other thing I noticed, and I've heard a lot of people comment on this, that the previous version of the Oslo hat has the decreases written a little bit funny, and they don't quite make sense if you knit them exactly as the pattern would say. And they have been amended in the new pattern, in the new like version of the pattern. So it should be a lot easier to follow now if you have never knit a hat or never done decreases like this. I think it will be, you know, very easy to follow along now. I don't know if it was necessarily a mistake in the first version of the pattern, but yeah, they just didn't quite make sense, and you had to use your intuition a little bit to figure out what was going on. But yeah, now they are worded in a way that makes total sense. I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see with this black yarn, but yeah, the Oslo hat has these like classic 4 points of decreases all the way up to the crown, and it gives a really nice shape. It's not too pointy, it's nice and rounded. And because this is acrylic and it is quite stiff, I managed to block it basically standing up like this, so there was no obvious fold line. And I think that worked out pretty well. I just stuck it on top of a sieve upside down on my counter, and it ended up drying quite quickly as well. The overall knitting experience with this was fine. I don't love knitting with acrylic yarn. It's very squeaky and doesn't flow as nicely on the needles as a wool or a wool blend does. It's also starting to get a little bit of like a halo around the edge here. I did throw this through the washing machine just to double check that it's definitely machine washable, and it came out fine. I think that's just the nature of working with acrylic yarn like this. It's not like super soft or anything, so I don't think pilling should be too much of an issue. I just think that's, yeah, will just be happening with this type of yarn. So yeah, there's the Oslo hat. I don't feel like I really need to say much more about it, so let's move on to my works in progress. I feel like I had just started this in the last episode. It's hard for me to remember. I think I was casting on quite a few projects before my trip just to have them on the needles and ready to go. This is the whip I have made the most amount of progress on, and this is the Relaxed Tee by Aimee Sher. As you can see, I have knit the whole body and all of one sleeve as well. And yeah, I'm just ready to pick up and knit the second sleeve. The yarn I'm using for this is the Drops Baby Merino in the colour Cream. It's 100% superwash merino and it is very, very soft. It's more of a sport weight-ish yarn. The pattern calls for a fingering weight yarn, so I was a little bit worried about it being too big and my gauge being off. So for that reason, I did go down a needle size and I've knit the main body on a 3mm needle. I'm really happy with the fabric that this combination has made, and all of this is blocked except for the cuff on the sleeve. But yeah, it is a really nice soft fabric, which was really important for me for this project. I wanted this to be something I could very comfortably wear against skin with no itchiness and have it almost like a nicer looking sweatshirt that I could just throw on at any time with any outfit, and just have that like a long sleeve t-shirt almost. The gauge for this pattern is 24 stitches by 32 rounds, and my gauge is coming out as 27 stitches and 37 rounds. So unfortunately I am quite far off gauge and it is coming out a little bit tighter than I would have liked. I'll do a try on and then I can just show how it's looking at the moment. I am actually really pleased with this colour. I was a little bit nervous about it being too yellowy cream, but now that it's on, I'm quite glad I went with this instead of like the bright white colour. So I did end up knitting the second size in the pattern just to give myself a little bit more of an oversized fit with a little bit more ease and drape to it, which I feel like with this yarn would look the best. But yeah, I'm not getting as much ease as I would have liked. I was hoping to get the recommended amount of ease, which is about 6.5 centimeters, but in the body I'm getting only around 4 centimeters, and on the sleeves there's basically no ease at all, and they are pretty fitted. I don't mind so much having less ease on the body. I think it still looks quite good, but now that I have this sleeve on, it is far too tight, which is a little bit frustrating considering I've knitted the whole of the first sleeve. As I mentioned, I have already blocked this. I didn't block it super aggressively, so perhaps I might be able to do another block and just see if I can get a little bit more width out of it, especially in the sleeves. But I have a feeling I might have to rip back at least the sleeve and knit a size up, or maybe just do fewer decreases. It's not too tight up here, but yeah, with these tapered sleeves, it does get too tight kind of around this point and further down my arm. So in the end, I probably should have just stuck to the recommended needle size for the pattern. I did swatch for this and I used a 3mm needle and managed to get gauge, but I have a feeling my swatches are usually a little bit looser than the actual garment once I'm knitting it. Normally when I'm working on a project and I start doubting myself, I will always just do a mid-project block and just see where I'm at with my gauge, just to check that I'm on track or no, I need to rip back and start again and change something. But because I was knitting on this when I was away, I didn't really have the time or the brain space or like the physical space to be blocking a sweater and letting it dry. And I was just kind of working on this when I was chatting with my family in the evenings. And yeah, I just didn't really stop to try it on very often or think about what I was doing, which is fine. Like, I really enjoyed knitting on this. But yeah, I need to make a few decisions on what I want to do now. If I had done a mid-project block after I had finished the yoke, I probably would have ripped back and just reknit everything on a needle size up. But I'm not sure if that's what I want to do at this point. At the moment, I am leaning towards leaving the body as it is and just reknitting the sleeves, and perhaps just going up a size in the pattern, or potentially just knitting them straight and not doing a tapered sleeve. I will just have to double check that I'll have enough yarn to do that. I feel like I didn't over order by too many balls, so yeah, I'll have to see if I have enough yarn to just knit straight sleeves, or maybe I just omit half the decreases, or yeah, just figure out how loose I can make the sleeves without running out of yarn. I also don't want it to look disproportionate to the amount of ears in the body, but yeah, I feel like I might be able to block a little bit more width out of this, and maybe a little bit of length as well. I would usually prefer my sweaters to sit a little bit lower here around my hip bone, so maybe if I can get a couple of centimeters extra out of the length, that would be nice. I pretty much followed the pattern, I think, for everything. For my size, I don't think I made too many modifications. I have a feeling I added maybe a little bit of length onto the body already, and I know I added a good couple of centimeters onto the sleeve just because I have to do that anyway for most sleeves. I'm a big fan of this compound raglan. I think it looks really well fitted and intentional rather than just having straight lines that come out like this. They're a bit more curved and I think it looks really nice. It also makes it a little bit more exciting when you're knitting a raglan. I find they get a little bit boring when you're just doing the same thing around and around. But because you're changing your increase rate and sometimes increasing the sleeve, sometimes just the body, it just keeps it a little bit more exciting to knit. So the collar and the hems and the cuffs are all finished in 2x2 rib. And I did end up using the Rook bind off method that I'd learned from my Lisa top that is by the Knit Pearl Girl, and that's the bind off that is suggested for that pattern. And it was the first time I'd used it and I really enjoyed how it worked up. It was very quick and easy. It's a sewn bind off, but instead of like a typical Italian or tubular bind off, you're slipping the needle through the first 3 stitches on the needle and then only dropping off the first one and repeating that the whole way around. And it creates a really stretchy bind off, but it doesn't flare out. In the video tutorial I followed, the person said that they use it on toe up socks quite often instead of Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. But I thought it would look really nice on 2x2 rib. I don't really like how an Italian bind off looks on 2x2 rib. I just feel like I can never get it to look very neat and the stitches are always pulling off to the side and I just don't really love how it looks. It's also quite fiddly and I feel like for the amount of effort, it's never really worth it for me. But here's a close-up on how it looks on the cuff and I think it looks really neat. I think it looks a bit nicer than just a regular in pattern bind off, and of course it has a little bit more stretch, which is always beneficial, especially for the collar because it is a fairly fitted neckline. Of course, one of the other main features is these beautiful garter bumps that are all over the sleeves and the body. I love how they look, and it also kept it a bit more interesting to knit because you have something different at frequent intervals throughout the whole body and the sleeves, so it feels like you're making good progress every time you get to another set of garter bumps. So overall, I am quite happy with how this is going. I think I need to figure out the sleeve situation, and I do wish I had knit it on a 3.5mm needle, but I didn't, so we're here now. And yeah, I'll probably end up ripping back the sleeve and figuring out something else because it is just a little bit too tight, and now I'm wearing it and sitting here I am noticing that it's a bit uncomfortable, so at least that's made up my mind that I will need to do something about this sleeve. The pattern is very easy to follow. The instructions are worded nice and clearly. There is also a raglan tracker document that comes separately to the pattern, so if you're someone who finds that kind of resource useful, it's nice that it's included as well. I didn't use it myself, I just prefer following the written out worded instructions. I would happily knit more of Aimee's patterns in the future. I think they have quite a few that I have my eye on. So there might be more of this designer popping up in the future on this podcast. My next work in progress is a pair of socks. And I remember I shared the beginnings of this pair of socks in the last episode. I have knit one sock since then, but we need to talk about this because I'm not very happy with how it's turned out. These are the Kanerva socks by Rachel Coopey, and I'm using the pattern from the 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 1 book. And I am knitting them in West Yorkshire Spinners Exquisite 4-ply, which is 80% wool and 20% silk. This beautiful burnt orange colour is called Sorrento. It's the first time I've used this yarn, but it is beautiful. It's so nice and soft, and it does have that little bit of a luxurious feeling to it with the silk. So I'm quite happy with the yarn. These socks will be a gift for a lovely friend of mine, and even though I've knit one sock, I think I'm going to have to re-knit the whole sock and obviously knit the second one as well. So the pattern uses a fingering weight yarn with a 2.5mm needle, and typically I would knit my socks on a 2.25, but with the cable design I figured I'd be better off sticking with the pattern, just in case it did make it quite tight with the cables. I will say though that this does have a good amount of stretch to it still, so I don't know how necessary it was for me to be worried about that, but yeah, I have just stuck to a 2.5mm needle. This sock I knit in the second size in the pattern, but it has turned out way too big. I remember thinking that when I was working on the first sock, that I would just knit the leg and see how it went, and then after that maybe figure out if I needed to rip back and start again with the first size. As I was knitting it, I figured it would be fine. It was coming out a little bit loose on my legs, but I figured that would be okay. I'd rather have socks be a tiny bit too big than be too tight. But after blocking, yeah, this has grown out way too much, and I just don't think it will really be wearable. As a comparison, here is a sock that I've knit for myself compared to this one, and you can just see how much extra fabric is on the leg, and especially around the heel. It just didn't really fit very well. So I was a bit worried, and I just decided that I was going to reknit them in the first size. Here is the progress I've made on the second sock, I guess the first sock in the first size, and I have decided to make a few other changes than just knitting with fewer stitches. I felt like the cuff on this was a little bit out of proportion to the rest of the sock, so I've taken off about 1/3 of the cuff on this sock, and I'm liking how this looks a little bit better. I have also decided to not knit one of these bobbles in every single section that goes down the whole sock. The pattern does have you skip this first one up here, which I thought was a little bit weird because it's not repeated anywhere else in the sock, and you've already done one just after the cuff here. But I do like how it looks with like the plain sections between the cables. So I have just decided to add the bobble in every other section, so I'll just skip one in between, and I think it would just make it look a little bit less busy. The other thing I didn't really love about the pattern is the toe. I feel like it's way too square and just needed a lot more shaping for it to fit someone's foot properly. So I'll probably just stop knitting the ribbing section a little bit sooner and then do some more decreases to shape it into a nicer rounded toe instead. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating that I have to knit 2 more socks, even though I've knit one already, but they don't take a huge amount of time, and it's actually quite an enjoyable pattern to knit. I'm really enjoying working the cables, and now that I've knit one and blocked this, I know how nicely it will block out as well. Here is a comparison. This one has not been blocked at all, so I know the cables will relax and open up a little bit and look a little bit neater once I finish this and block them. So those are the pair of socks that I have on the needle at the moment, and I have one more work in progress to share, but I think this one might be going into hibernation for a little bit. It is a summery project, and I just feel like at the moment with the wintry weather we're getting, I'm not really motivated to work on this, so I figured I wouldn't force myself. I think I'll just set it aside until spring comes around, and then I'll have, you know, good progress on a summer garment ready to go. The cable is a little bit small, so you might have to use your imagination to figure out what I'm holding up. This is the beginnings of a sea salt tee, and I'm knitting this in Knitting for Olive cotton merino in the color Mole. I am just holding it single stranded. The pattern is more of like a sport weight yarn, but I figured with the pattern gauge and the gauge I know I can achieve with this yarn, I should be okay, and just have like a little bit more of a lighter weight, flowier, looser gauge fabric, which is completely fine with me. This project was my travel airplane knitting, so I was using wooden needles to work on this, and I think I ended up using a 3mm needle. I'm so glad to report that I didn't get these taken off me, and I didn't break one either. I'm really paranoid about snapping wooden needles, but I was very diligent about taking the needles off the cord and putting them back in the box when I wasn't actively working on this. I have knit quite a few sea salt tees before, and I feel like it's a really good travel project. It's a contiguous sleeve, so you end up working increases to shape the sleeve cap. So it's kind of like a raglan with the increases, but instead of shaping around here, you are just shaping the sleeves instead. I did make a pretty good amount of progress. I'm not quite at the point where I need to split for sleeves, but I'm not too far off. So I think this will be a good point to just set it aside, because I'm honestly just not really feeling like working on a cotton t-shirt at the moment. But I know when, spring comes around, it will be nice to have something like this that I've already made, you know, really good progress through the yoke. This t-shirt also has folded over edges and like a folded over collar. So once I've finished the yoke, I might go back in and add the collar and just see how it's looking. But yeah, I think I've just got other projects I'm more excited to be working on right now. But I'm glad that I had this with me as like my travel project. Those are all of my active whips at the moment. I do have my Sweet Shop blanket and the Lisa top by the Knit Pearl Girl, and I haven't worked on either of those since the last episode, so I didn't figure there was much point in sharing them. I mentioned before that I do have a good amount of acquisitions, so I'm excited to show you what I got and brainstorm some ideas of what I can knit with them. Most of my family live in Somerset, but they're not too far away from Devon, so whilst we were there, my sister and I drove to Exeter and we met up with a friend of ours. And I did also drag everyone to a yarn shop called Wool on the X. It's a little bit out of the main part of town, but it was a lovely shop and I'm really glad I ended up going there. I picked up these 2 balls of yarn. This is the Milburn 4-ply from Eden Cottage Yarns, and I hadn't seen or heard of this yarn before, but they had such a gorgeous colour selection. As you can see, I went with this beautiful lilac-y purple colour and a creamy neutral as well. This yarn is 85% BFL and 15% silk and is 200 meters per 50 grams, so a classic fingering weight yarn. The purple is the colour Dusk and this is the colour Natural, and they are a little bit worse for wear after being in my bag on the way home. My plan for these 2 balls is to knit a pair of stripy socks, and I'm kind of looking at the helix sock pattern, which I saw Savannah from Savannah Knits make a pair for herself. When I saw these 2 colours together, that immediately popped into my mind, so I feel like it was meant to be. I think I'll cast these on probably after I have finished the Kanerva socks, just because I only like to have 1 pair of socks on the needles. I'm quite pleased with my colour selection. I denied about it a lot and I had to get everyone's opinion about what colours I was going to put together. I did want something with a good amount of contrast, but I think these 2 will pair really nicely together. I also managed to score some yarn in the local like fabric shop that is in my hometown. There wasn't a huge range of yarn, but they did have a few odd skeins from West Yorkshire Spinners, so I ended up getting this beautiful burnt orangey brown skein. It is the West Yorkshire Spinners Bluefaced Leicester Fleece in their DK weight. The colourway is called Umber. This is 225 meters per 100 grams. And yes, as you can see, I've already wound it up and I have swatched for a project already. I didn't actually realize until now that this is 225 meters per 100 grams, which makes sense because I did feel like it was a tiny bit thinner than another DK weight yarn that I had bought to pair with it. Melissa from MB Makes gave me some really good feedback about this yarn. She said it works up beautifully, and I think she's knit a whole sweater using it before, so I'm quite excited to see how it goes. So I bought this skein without really having a plan in mind, but then my mum and I took a trip to another yarn shop called the Lace Knittery, and I have to say that's probably one of the best yarn shops I've ever been to. They had a really good selection of yarn. They had even the Istex yarn, which was very tempting to buy a sweater's quantity of, but I just didn't think I would have the room in my luggage to bring it home. And they also had a lot of British breeds that I hadn't heard of or wouldn't be able to purchase here. As I was there, I saw this yarn from Armscote Manor. It is their Portland wool, which is very interesting. I hadn't heard of this breed before, but it says this Portland wool is spun entirely from fleeces of our own flock of conservation grazed rare breed sheep. And that sold me, to be honest. I thought it would be a good opportunity to try something that I hadn't heard of, or probably wouldn't be able to access here. It does look and feel very rustic, and you can see there are little bits of vegetable matter still in the yarn, but that doesn't really bother me. It is nice to remember that this has come from a real living animal. I assume this is an undyed wool. It doesn't have any colour name on it, and this was the only colour that they had available. I purchased 3 balls of this, which is more of a true DK weight yarn. There is 110 meters per 50 grams, and I just thought together they would pair really nicely into a slip over. My initial plan was to knit the Hannah slipover by the Knit Pearl Girl. There are instructions in the pattern for a striped version, which really caught my eye. I've never knit or worn a slipover before, so I'm not sure how I feel about them, but I guess I won't know until I try. I have done a quick swatch with these two yarns already, and I love the stripes. I think they look really nice together. The colours are obviously very high contrast, but I think they complement each other really nicely. I did swatch on the recommended 4mm needles for the pattern, but typical for me and Sophie's patterns, I think I'm going to have to go down a needle size or two. I was a little bit worried because this is a very rustic feeling yarn, whereas this is a little bit more of a softer feeling. Even though it is BFL, it is much softer than the Portland wool. Now that I've knit a swatch and blocked it, I think it will be okay. I think because the colour is such a high contrast, I don't think it looks unusual that one is more of a rustic wool and the other one is a bit lighter and softer. I will say that this was a little bit more of a splurge. It definitely wasn't a budget-friendly option, but I figured pairing it with this one and knitting a slipover, I wouldn't need a huge amount of yarn. So I'm hoping I will be able to squeeze a slipover out of both of these together. And speaking of splurging on yarn, and at the Lace Knittery, I also saw that they stocked Kinross 4-ply. I was very excited to see this yarn. It's one of those yarns that I have seen a lot of podcasters talk about, but it just felt like a dream that I would never be able to get my hands on or try this yarn. The Kinross 4-ply is 100% 4-ply lamb's wool, and I have heard that after blocking this yarn softens up like a dream, and it is a really beautifully soft fabric. They didn't have enough of one colour in stock as a sweater's quantity, so I did end up purchasing these two colours to hold together and also stripe into a sweater. I got 2 skeins of the colour Snowdrop and 3 skeins of the colour Seashell, and I'm hoping that just over 1,000 meters will be enough for me to get a fingering weight sweater, although I'm kind of thinking I might fall a little bit short or have to have something fairly fitted. I don't think they had any more of either of these colours in stock, otherwise I probably would have grabbed an extra skein just to be safe. So I'm just going to have to make it work with what I've got. I've also done a swatch with this, and it is a little bit damp still. I only blocked it this morning, but I have to say it's not softened up to the point of feeling like cashmere or anything super soft. It does feel really nice, and I think this will be absolutely fine for me to wear against skin. It could also be one of those things that depends on the exact colorway that you have, and maybe with a little bit more wear and wash it will soften up even more. But yeah, I am quite excited to have this yarn and knit it into a sweater. So I have swatched on a 3mm needle and also done some 4-row stripes, and I love how these colors look together. I like that it's a bit more of a low contrast stripe versus the like brown and the cream of this one. I'm not sure on an exact pattern at the moment. I have been looking at options for fingering weight striped sweaters on Ravelry. I haven't found one that I'm 100% sold on just yet. My current thought is maybe to knit the Tombow tee by Handmade by Florence and just extend it into long sleeves. There aren't long sleeves written into the pattern, so I am just a bit nervous about my yarn management, and I'll just have to keep an eye on how things are going. I would really like this to be a long-sleeved fingering weight sweater. There's one more yarn acquisition to share, and I was very excited that I managed to make it into the Beautiful Knitters shop in London. They also gave me this gorgeous tote bag with their logo on it that I was very happy to be walking around London with. I felt very cool. It was a very quick stop. I was only in London for a few hours before we had to head to the airport, and it was literally the only thing that we did once we got into London. We got off the train, dropped off our bags, and then trekked across London to get to the shop, and it was a really hot day. I didn't really realize what it felt like to be in the 30 degrees in a big city like that, but it just feels so much more hot than it does here when it's 30 degrees. It's not too bad, and we're quite near the coast, so we always have a breeze. But yeah, we were all melting, and I don't think my family were too happy about having to trek it across the city. To be fair, I didn't force them, they wanted to come. So yeah, it was just a very quick visit into the shop. But I did pick up this skein of hand-dyed yarn from Zakami. Again, this is a hand dyer that I always hear people talk about and show off in podcasts, but I just feel like I would never be able to get it here. So it was nice to be able to see all the colours in person and feel the bases as well. This is the 100% Corriedale base, and the colourway is called The World Is On Hold. I really love the peach and grey speckles of this yarn, so I'm looking forward to working this into something. The label does say it is suitable for socks, and I'm not against knitting it in a pair of socks, even though there's no nylon or silk or anything in there to strengthen it. I'm just not sure I need another pair of socks in my sock drawer, so I'm kind of thinking maybe I experiment with knitting a tank top or a garment or something along the lines of that with a single skein. I'm leaning maybe towards knitting a Palm Springs tank. I've already knit one, and I think I could be able to squeeze another one with a single skein of fingering weight yarn, or maybe look at doing one of the bralettes or something by Aimee. I don't have to worry about that too much at the moment. It's nice to just have this skein in my stash and just look at it and appreciate how beautiful it is. I have one more acquisition to share that is not yarn related, but I did pick up some fabric from the local fabric shop that is in my hometown. It is this beautiful, I think it's 100% cotton, brown micro gingham, and it's very me. I like gingham, I like brown, and I thought it would be a nice souvenir to bring home with me. I have a few ideas floating around in my head of what to make with this. My initial thought was maybe a tie-up blouse, like the Sid tie top, or I might even have enough to make the dress version of that without sleeves, or perhaps a midi or a maxi skirt. I'm not 100% decided on what I'm going to do with it, but those are some ideas that are floating around my head. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching until the end. I know that was a lot of acquisitions to get through. I don't typically have this many acquisitions. If you have any pattern suggestions for any of the yarn that I have accumulated, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. As always, I would love to know what you've been working on whilst watching, or what your plans are for the upcoming future. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye!